Mr. President, I rise today in support of Senate Joint Resolution 6, a resolution of disapproval of the FCC's net neutrality order. Over the last 2 years, the Federal Communications Commission has put forward a variety of what are considered net neutrality policies. On September the 23rd of this year, the FCC published a final rule in the Federal Register, which is set to go into effect on November 20th to impose harmful net neutrality regulations on our nation's telecommunications companies. The digital world in which we now live, Mr. President, has changed dramatically the way that we retrieve information, communicate with one another, and engage in commerce. Technological advances, even the last few years, have pushed our economy forward. These advancements in technology and their adoption often depend heavily on access to broadband technologies. While the telecommunications industry has flourished, boosted our economy, and made critical investments in broadband deployment across the country, this administration believes that imposing additional regulations is a step in the right direction. In places across the country, like my home state of South Dakota, there is still work to be done when it comes to unfettered and affordable access to high-speed broadband. With the FCC voting recently to reform the Universal Service Fund to shift to a focus on broadband deployment, it seems to me that simultaneously moving forward with net neutrality regulations will have a chilling effect on this now thriving industry. We learned last week from the Department of Labor that the unemployment rate still hovers around 9%, Mr. President. The American people want to see federal policies that encourage innovation and spur job growth, not yet another regulatory overreach by an overzealous agency. Unfortunately, the FCC net neutrality policy will give considerable authority to unelected bureaucrats to decide what a company's network management should look like. The federal courts have ruled that the FCC lacks the authority under the Telecommunications Act of 1996 to move forward with net neutrality regulations. Still, the Democratic appointees of the FCC have persisted, without regard to the courts, to settle the political debt owed by the Obama administration to special interest groups in favor of regulating the Internet. The FCC and this administration must be brought into line and abide by the separation of powers. The FCC must only execute the responsibilities given to it by Congress and not overreach its regulatory authority. Mr. President, freedom of the Internet belongs in the marketplace, not in the hands of federal regulators. The FCC has moved forward to fix a problem that does not exist. Mr. President, this is a solution in search of a problem. Industry-imposed standards and transparency have the capability to increase competition, while more unnecessary government regulations will almost certainly have the opposite effect. Under a light regulatory structure, the Internet has become vital to commerce in our nation's economy over the past 15 years. The Internet has helped digitally shrink the distance that otherwise would inhibit the free flow of ideas, information, and business transactions from one part of the world to another. The Internet's adaptability and decentralized characteristics are central to that success. This federal regulatory action represents unnecessary government overreach and has the potential to seriously damage an increasingly important sector of our economy. I don't believe that the federal government can successfully regulate network access and development without negative effects on the consumer or the industry. Allowing this unnecessary regulation to move forward has the potential to stifle broadband deployment and competition, which could ultimately lead to fewer choices for consumers, higher prices, and discourage innovation. I believe the net neutrality regulations, if allowed to move forward, will have negative effects on this industry and our economy, and I would encourage my colleagues, Mr. President, tomorrow to support this resolution of disapproval. The economy doesn't need this, our job creators don't need this, and the millions of Americans who are benefiting from the information revolution that's been brought about by the Internet don't need this either. This is an opportunity for us to send a little bit of a message to industry that we understand, we get what they're saying about overregulation. We get that these piles of regulations continue to drive up the cost of doing business in this country. And as my colleague, the presiding officer, noted in his remarks, the need for economic certainty. Businesses need to know what the rules are going to be. It seems to me, at least, that creating a whole set of new rules and piling new regulations on this very important medium in a way that which we have grown commerce in this country, opened up markets across the world, created opportunities for consumers in this country to become more productive with their lives, is the absolute wrong approach at this particular point in time, particularly with the unemployment rate being what it is. We want to make it less expensive, less costly, easier for our job creators to create jobs in this country, not put unnecessary barriers and more obstacles and drive up the cost and make it more difficult for people in this country to create jobs. Businesses are looking for economic uncertainty. They're looking to Washington, D.C. for policies that will lessen the impediments and the number of obstacles to job creation in this country.